In 2 years at the helm, Stephen Vogt is 2-2 when it comes to division titles. Guardians, however, have no World Series rings to show for it. But the Guardians better put a ring on it with Stephen Vogt before he goes California Dreamin'.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Come on, it's an episode of Locked On Guardians, Tuesday, October 14th. Our favorite half hour of the day. We hope it's yours as well, because the next half hours we're talking about your Cleveland Guardians, proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We cover your Cleveland Guardians from the majors, the minors, the draft, everything in between, every single day. I'm Justin Lada, one of your two co-hosts for the last 3 seasons plus now. And I've also spent 18 years covering the Guardians minor league farm system, where I've found many managers, or at least I thought were future managers.
Did we just go from Beyonce to Katy Perry? Was that what the opening was? Is that for those who don't know, I'm Jeff Ellis here. I've been doing this since Locked On expanded into baseball many years ago. Before that, I was a national writer. It's gotten 24/7, focused on prospects and the draft. I want to thank you for making today's episode your first listen today and every day, wherever it is you get podcasts. A big shout out to all of our everydayers out there. Just a ton of great people, a ton of great comments. Appreciate all of you. Thank you for joining us today and every day.
Yeah, you can comment below right now what artist I went to. Yes, Jeff got one half of it right. Beyonce.
Oh.
The second half, it's not quite Katy Perry. You can comment below. I'll reveal the answer.
She have that song like California Dreamin'.
That's California Girls.
Oh,
I don't think Stephen Vogt's wife is from California, so I don't know.
I don't know. I better watch. I'm going to get us demonetized.
Yeah, you're going to be plagiarizing the
Yes,
Katy Perry song.
Sorry.
On today's show, we'll talk about if somebody else believes in Stephen Vogt. We'll talk about the Guardians' first order of business this offseason needs to be extending Stephen Vogt. But we'll talk now. Why we think Stephen Vogt and his staff are the right fit for the Guardians to achieve the goals they're looking towards. Of course, that is a World Series. First, let you know, today's episode of Locked On Guardians brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, if you're a new customer, bet $5. Your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download FanDuel today. The managerial carousel has already started this offseason. It seems pretty crazy for the fact that we're not even into the full offseason yet. And I don't think any of the remaining teams are firing their manager. Like Pat Murphy obviously isn't going anywhere. Dan Wilson's not. John Schneider, I doubt is. I'm pretty sure he saved his job in Toronto. And obviously, I don't think Dave Roberts is going anywhere. I think everyone in Toronto saved their job, right? We're pretty good there. Yeah, I think everyone's good there. So this should be it as far as we know, in case somebody gets picked off and someone else is looking, which we'll talk about today. But there's a lot of openings this offseason. I feel like there's a good chance somebody on the Guardians gets pilfered to another organization, whether that's a big name, a name we don't know, or even if it's a role that's a promotion. If somebody goes from like assistant hitting coach here to, hitting coach somewhere else, or assistant pitching coach here to pitching coach somewhere else. I could see those sorts of things happening, and we don't know about Alvarez or Kai Correa, obviously. Is there any doubt in your mind that Stephen Vogt is the right guy for the team and the franchise at this moment?
Nothing but doubt. I just doubt. No, I mean,
no doubt.
Everyone tells me I'm a contrarian all the time, so I just have to say, no, he's clearly not the. No, I think these past 2 years have gone well. There's every reason for a team to pitch it in and give up this year, and they did not, and they kept them going. And listen, is it perfect? No, there's always ups and downs. There's always things. There's no such thing as a perfect manager in baseball. But I mean, I think it's silly to think that he is doing a poor job. I'll say that. But if I have to play my role of contrarian, then I guess I have to say, no, he's terrible. Fire him tomorrow.
They should definitely hire. I don't have a name.
Grady
Sizemore. Good. Ron Washington, yes, who made it through a full year. Did not make it through a full year in Los Angeles.
I'm teasing. Everyone, please acknowledge it's a joke.
Honestly, who could make it through a full year in the Angels organization? I couldn't do it. I guess if you pay me enough money, I could.
What's the
But
line from Airplane? Like, I picked the wrong week to give up sniffing glue. Like that would be, I picked the wrong year to give up sniffing glue to take
you're
on the
gonna get us
Angels.
demonetized even
Well,
more.
I thought that was the safest one to go to of all the lines that get said by Robert Stack. No, not
so you've got that movie reference, but you didn't understand the song reference that I made of the cold.
Do you mean the old one, like California Dreamin' on a summer's day? Is that what you're going with?
Just wait till the end. We'll reveal at the end of the show. We'll just have to stick around for a reason. No, I think Stephen Vogt is the right guy. I think I'm not saying nobody else could have done what he did this year in terms of helping this team stay together and overcome what they did, mid-season, from being as bad as they were to getting. Maybe they were always this good. You know what I mean? Like maybe the team that we saw at the end of the year that won the division that went 20. I'm not saying they should have been 20-7 every month or whatever, but maybe talent-wise they were always that good, and it took some different things and some breaks to go their way to get there. But certainly getting through the navigation of two players being unrosterable due to gambling investigations certainly adds a new wrinkle. And like I think we've said this before, it's not something you can prepare for in the offseason. You can go back and think about what you did in Game 5 of the ALDS or Game 4 of the ALCS, and what you did on June 28th with the pitching change or a pinch hitting appearance. But you can't go and prepare what's going to happen when one of your players is unavailable because they're being investigated for potentially gambling. Like that's there's no playbook for that. So give somebody who's in its second year a lot of credit for doing that. And there are things he can improve on, sure. Like I think this is one of those things where I think we have to ask ourselves, how much is the front office involved in this? And B, there's certain pockets of information, or in this case, probably books of information that we don't have at our disposal that they do when it comes to platooning, just for the sake of the fact the Guardians wanted the platoon advantage. And that's great and all, but if the statistics don't back it up, then it doesn't work. I mean, they didn't exactly have a Brandon Guy or a Ryan Rayburn this year, but they sure as heck kept trying to fit a square peg into a round hole in that instance. That was probably the most frustrating thing this season, I would say. But everything seemed to work. I don't want to say everything was easy last year because he said himself that wasn't easy, but it certainly looked a lot like things fell into place a lot better in 2024 than they did 2025.
I mean, I think it was easy. There's when your bullpen is historically great, when you have mostly health, I think it was easy mode. And then this year, the bullpen, the suspensions, some of the guys they're counting on, again, like the Stephen Kwan not being healthy. Lane Thomas was supposed to at least be an average bat. You picked him to be an all-star. Not saying this to say anything mean to you, but it's like a lot of people did. You weren't alone in that. Like a lot of people had high hopes, and instead they just didn't get anything out of him. Like there was a lot to overcome this year, and they did it. It's kind of mind-boggling when you really sit down and think about it.
It is my Maggie. You can tell me I'm stupid. That was probably going out on a limb to say.
No, it wasn't stupid. There was a lot. I mean, if he had a career walk year, which some dudes do, then it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, worked out for Josh Naylor. I'm sure there won't be any comments today about Josh Naylor at all, who suddenly learned how to steal bases and hit the postseason all of a sudden.
But he didn't have a career year. Like his power was down until the postseason. It's things for another day. I mean, he had a solid year. He is a solid performer every year, and he has a solid year.
Yeah. I think the biggest test this year was the bullpen for sure. And I think the one thing you could say is bullpen usage in the playoffs. I think managing that's the thing we probably should talk about is managing in the regular season is one thing. I think we need to discern between these two things. Managing in the postseason and managing in the regular season are two very different things.
Agreed.
And that's because in the regular season, for the most part, you're managing to get through the day and get to the next day, whereas you need to get through the day and you can't really worry about the next day of the postseason. Like you're balancing long term and short term, and that's why things are a little bit different. We can discuss more of that in the next segment. We'll talk about why the Guardians need to jump on extending Stephen Vogt as soon as they can, and later in the show we'll talk about if somebody else might be a believer in Stephen Vogt, a believer. We can even include that song reference in today's show. We'll see if Jeff gets that one. Coming up on today's Locked On Guardians. Everybody knows it is very hard to name all your financial accounts, what you're spending it on. whatever you're worth. That might include 401ks, properties, investments. And when you don't have the full picture, it's really hard to maximize your money, and you leave money on the table, or you're spending it in places you don't want to be spending it. That's why there's Monarch Money, because it is the all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together. And it's really one easy-to-use interface, whether you're on your laptop or your phone. Makes it easy to pull. Let's be honest. We're all spending money on things that we don't really know we're spending it on. We have subscriptions for this. Our account has our card linked to this. All that kind of stuff we're paying for these days. Everything is a subscription. You want to make sure you're spending your money wisely. That is where Monarch Money comes in and does the heavy lifting for you, so you can get smart categorization of your spending and feel in control of your money. Do not let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONMLB. Appreciate y'all being here with us today on Locked On Guardians and every day. Of course, if you're new here, we did the intros for a reason to start the show if you are new. But if you're not new, we do appreciate you doing the things like hitting the bell on YouTube so you get notified when an episode goes live, when there's a reaction video, when we do videos for news, and auto downloading on all of your favorite audio platforms, because we're everywhere. We can take us anywhere you go. You want to go on a run, we're there. You want to take a walk, go walk your dog, we're there. I wouldn't recommend, you can listen to the podcast, in your bathroom, wherever it might be. Just take us anywhere you want. Just do it on audio only, please. All right.
You do you. Whatever works. You do you.
Whatever, yeah. We'll go wherever you want to go. Just do or don't tell us about it. The reason I was saying before about the bullpen, too, is this is really a discussion for, I would say, a future show, because I'd like to spend more time on this topic. But the thing that's the difference between managing in the regular season and the postseason is, and this is why you see teams yank their starters so early in the postseason, and it's almost over managing to a point. But I think that's the one thing Stephen Vogt hasn't quite learned, or is still learning, or and this is just all in theory too, because again, he's got more information than we do at his fingertips when he's in the dugout, and he also knows his team, and he also knows the players better. And let's be honest, he also knows more about baseball than we do. So this is just us kind of going from the outside looking in. But you let your starters go a little bit longer in the regular season, because you can't always tax your bullpen during the season. You've got, 3 games or 4 games in a row, or you got 13 games in a row, or 13 games in 14 days, whatever it is. And in the postseason, someday you get an off day at some point, but in the postseason, you're just ripping starters out of there. We're seeing it left and right. There's bullpenning going on this postseason. And I think the one consistent criticism you can find about Stephen Vogt, or any manager, is not sticking with your starters long enough and overusing the bullpen. That's the thing I think you and I have talked about most with this. And if I was to guess, or at least if we were running the show in terms of exit meetings for next year, the one thing I would talk about is postseason management. How do we change how we do things in the postseason? Like, players. The players got to play. The players got to execute. You got to have the horses in the postseason. And we know there's a degree of random variance and luck involved. But, Stephen Vogt's 5-8 in his first 13 postseason games. He's got almost a 56% winning percentage in the regular season. So he can get it done in the regular season. I think the question is the postseason. What do you ask? What do you try to think about differently going into next year when it comes to the postseason? You got to get there first. But I think there are things to look at differently. I think that's one of them.
Yeah, I mean, you have to not, my biggest complaint is always been the postseason and asking guys to do things they haven't done, and then not having as much faith and success. It's the old expression, you dance with the girl that you brought, or dance with the one, however that goes. But
dance with the one that brought you here, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like you have to at some point trust your starting pitching. You can't just constantly go, and then with the bullpen, like every bit of data available says you can't go 3 days in a row. Like, we just have to start realizing that. Like, if you want to, then you got to let Gavin walk the tightrope and see if he can get a bit more. You got to sit there and have, Tanner get more opportunities, because let's be real honest, outside of Kate Smith, there's no one in this bullpen who's approaching Andrew Miller. Like, you could get away with it with someone like Andrew Miller, who was, the best in the game at that time period. When you had Class A, that could maybe work, and it did work to some degree with Smith. But then again, by that point, the pressure was off. So who's to say? But it just that sitting there and throwing Gaddis and Zabrowski 3 days in a row, that's a recipe for failure, and it ended up failing. Now, one can also argue the other side of the coin is, that you can really. Oh man, I'm gonna go super negative here. Sorry, everyone. You can put a lot of the first round exit on at Vogt's feet. I know people didn't like when I tried to defend. And it wasn't necessarily that I agreed with playing Rodriguez and Noel, but I at least tried to explain the why of it. But if he doesn't play those two dudes, they win the first game and the other part doesn't matter. If he doesn't mishandle the bullpen is what blew up in game 3. Both losses really kind of stem from poor choices. And that's one of those things they gotta now also, you can say it stems from an abysmal offense, and I'll also be fair. But it's all these little parts, and maybe the abysmal offense is why he felt like he had to do all these little things. I mean, we pretty much know that's the case, but there's also better ways to go about it. And he took approaches that were not the ideal, and I came back to haunt him. I don't know what they would have looked like against Seattle, how that series would have gone. Now, Seattle had a lot of points where they struggled with offense, as did the Tigers. But they really could have very easily advanced. More so than a year ago, I was never going to say they could have very easily advanced against the Yankees. They got handed to them in that series. When you take 1 out of 5 games, the Detroit series, they did have a legit chance. And like I said, you can really make a case that Stephen Vogt biffed it.
Yeah, I mean, how much of that again is connection to the front office? How much. We never really know how much control there is there, how much they have their footprint, their fingerprints on things. We know there was talk about how, I guess I can say it on the air too. Clayton McCullough was pretty sure he was getting this job, 2 off seasons ago, to the point where he was actually calling people and trying to build a staff. There were guys he was calling to come in and be part of his staff in Cleveland. And then they reversed course, or I don't know what happened, honestly. But I've heard that a couple times now, and we know part of that might have had to do with the fact that the front office might have wanted some input over who was on the coaching staff. And that's not something you or I think I can verify. That's just something that we can say we've heard, and that's the end of that. It's a possibility that was the case there.
I'll say though, the roster and some of the things in game going to the bullpen, that can't be them. They're not there. They don't
true.
Have that ability, so that's we know that.
That's definitely true. But I mean, things like having Chase Lauder on the ALD on the wild card roster and playing him in center field when you haven't done that all year, and he hasn't played center field since 2024, and playing Jonathan. I mean, the Jonathan Rodriguez thing, you could say, well, what happened to the roster? The fact that he was even
they cut Santana and Fry got hurt.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So how did we get to the point where that even was an option is not necessarily on at the feet of Stephen Vogt, but the fact that he was there and they decided together that was the best route forward is something you can question, I think, Vogt, but everybody else on. Because I think both the Guardians and Tigers felt like they could have swept that series if things had tilted a little bit differently in the first 2 games. That being said, I still think you extend Stephen Vogt. I'm not saying he's a perfect manager.
I agree.
But remember, this is a guy who had no previous managing experience. This is a guy who came in from Seattle, who was their bullpen coach for 1 year, the year after he retired, and he came in and took over a manager. We're getting to the point in baseball now where a lot of these managers are not going to the minor leagues. You don't have a whole lot of guys anymore who are managing 10, 12, or whatever it is years in the minors and finally getting the promotion to the majors. Those days have been gone. These guys are going from retired to managing in a couple of years, maybe with an assistant role. And the reason we're bringing this up, obviously, is Stephen Vogt is in year 2 of 3 of his first managerial contract. So I think what we've seen so far is he's the right guy for it. And what we know, too, is the managerial stuff in the regular season, a lot of what that is day-to-day management, and it's personality management. It's a lot of HR stuff, too. Making sure the clubhouse is good and the guys believe. I have no doubts about that. I think when it comes to behind closed doors, I feel like Stephen Vogt's got it down to a pretty good science. I mean, he's well-liked. He's always been well-liked as a player, and that's translated to him as a coach as well. it's just the little things, and the unfortunate little things have a big impact, right? The postseason, bullpen management, all those kinds of things. So the obvious answer here is Stephen Vogt needs a second contract when it comes to managing the Guardians. I don't think there's anybody else out there, but somebody else might feel like Stephen Vogt is the perfect fit for them. We'll talk about who that is next on today's Locked On Guardians. The NFL season, it is well underway right now, and FanDuel is still coming at you with an offer we know you're not going to want to miss. If you want $300 in bonus bets to use across the FanDuel app to make the NFL season a little bit more fun, if you're a new customer, put down $5 on the FanDuel app on a bet you feel pretty good about, and if it's going to win, if it does win, that's how you unlock the $300 in bonus bets to join and have fun responsibly on the FanDuel app. If I was going to put that money down on the FanDuel app, I would definitely be putting down the $5 on the Browns to lose. I know right now they're favored by 2.5 as they host the Dolphins at home. The Dolphins have been bad too, so who knows? But I don't know. I feel like that's the way to go. As far as baseball is concerned, Blue Jays, Mariners, that series is already pretty wild. But the Mariners, they're on a heater right now. Hard to believe you can bet against them. So at your own peril, do that. But what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. If you're enjoying what you hear and you want to hear a whole lot more, you can head over to Locked On MLB after you finish making Locked On Guardians your first listen today and every day, wherever it is you get podcasts. The MLB Game Night Show covers every game during the postseason until a World Series champion is crowned. They're doing it in a way only Locked On can do it, with the local hosts that know your teams the best, that know all these teams the best, so you get it coverage on a national scale with local insights from experts and fans of the team that you care about, or if you're just interested in hearing what the city and what the experts in the city think about what's going on. These playoffs have been wild. I think the Mariners are having a lot of fun. This Brewers and Dodgers game has been off the rails. I'm eager to tune in myself later today when they wrap it up and they get all the guys on there from Locked On Guardians or Locked On MLB on the channel. So go check that out. All right. So we teased that the Guardians probably need to make a case this offseason to extend Stephen Vogt. And maybe that's because there's another team out there that finds Stephen Vogt as their next manager. They think that's their wish casting. So JT Snow is a former Giants player, pretty good player. I think he was on there, the team that played in the World Series against the Angels.
He was a really good defender. It's what he was most known for. He's a little bit disappointing in terms of what he was a big prospect who really didn't quite live up to the hype. Small peak, never was quite as good as I think people were expecting, but a great defender. That was his thing, known for his first base defense.
So normally I would dismiss this kind of stuff as just like crazy conspiracies or just, rumors for the sake of drumming up content.
Snow does delete a ton of things, throws stuff at a wall, and is known for being
inflammatory.
Yes.
Yeah. JT Snow on Twitter has had a very interesting run. Stephen Vogt. JT Snow is a former Giant, of course, though. So he may have some connections there. Stephen Vogt obviously played for the Giants. The Guardians staff is well connected to the Giants. Craig Albarnez and Kai Correa both were on the Giants staff. So, there's some interesting links there. So JT Snow claims, I have a connection to the organization. I've never been invited back, but I think Stephen Vogt will be the next manager. That tweet was deleted, but the JT Snow's tweet is still up there saying he thinks that Stephen Vogt will be the next manager of the Giants. Now, Stephen Vogt does have one more year.
Made that comment before. I'll say that. That's not the first time. He's been. I found some stuff where he cycled through that over the course of the year this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's all kinds of stuff like that. So, yeah, I'm not necessarily sitting here saying, well, you got to think about this because we have no idea about JT Snow. But I think it's interesting to bring it up now because Vogt is entering the last year of his deal here. I think it's a no-brainer for Cleveland to extend him, as we've said about. But there's a lot of opening coaching spots, opening managerial spots in Major League Baseball. There's 6, I think, total right now. So I think locking him up just for that sake of things, because I really wouldn't want the Giants pursuing him. And who knows? I mean, Vogt's got, he played in San Francisco. His family's from the West Coast. He was born in California. There are ties there. So, Buster Posey's running. Buster Posey runs the show there. So, I don't know how this is going to go with Buster Posey. So like I lock him up for the sake of not having to deal with the unknown.
Honestly, I think there's a better chance of San Diego than San Francisco. I think San Francisco is going to hire Nick Hudley in the end. While he has while there's West Coast ties, his family's up in Washington. So I don't think it's anyone who really knows geography knows it's like it's probably not any quicker to fly from LA to Seattle than it is from Cleveland to Seattle if you can get a direct flight. It's pretty far as well.
Might be true. Yeah,
you know,
why the Mariners have the longest travel schedule.
Yeah,
everybody in Major League Baseball.
But I know it's not actually true, but I also don't think it's that far to say that. But overall, with the situation, I think like San Diego might be the one who would be most likely to go out and do something. Now, it has not happened since Lou Piniella was traded by the Seattle Mariners with Antonio Perez, who had been a top 20 prospect in baseball, who slid to a top 50 prospect because he got up to Double-A and got exposed. He ended up making it to the majors. Was never much of anything there, but they traded a top 50 prospect in a down year, plus Lou Piniella, and they got Randy Winn, who was coming off a career season with about 2 to 3 years control left. If you're trying to replicate that trade, to me, the maybe the failed prospect in that range could be Churio with Cleveland, the guy who's had the rough year, who's more of a defensive guy. But the problem is with the Giants and with San Diego, I can't really find a Randy Winn, even someone remotely approaching the Randy Winn type. It's like Helio Ramos can't play any. Randy Winn, for those who don't know, was Stephen Kwan before Stephen Kwan. Like, he was a guy who got on base, who, stole bases, who played solid defense, who had a mess of doubles. He got to 20 home runs once, but 3 times was at 14. Like, Randy Winn was a really good player for a lot of years there, and I would kill for a Randy Winn on the Guardians right now. But yeah, I think that it's, who knows. There's a reason why there has not been a trade for a manager since then. It did not work well for the Rays. That was one of those trades that they kind of got hammered about afterwards. But I think it's very clear you play the year with Stephen Vogt. You try to extend him and feel like both sides would want to reach that agreement, and then you see where it is, because let's be honest, more often than not, it's not the situation we see this year, where a Giants team that was kind of frisky and San Diego team that made the postseason, those losing a lot of their roster, where the manager retired. More often than not, when you get an opportunity for someone like Stephen Vogt, it's on a awful team. It's not on teams that are halfway decent.
Yeah, I don't know that the situation in San Francisco would be any better than the situation in Cleveland. Like, if he was to, I think the only thing that would maybe draw him there would just be proximity to home. He's from California, and I know they make their offseason home in Washington, like you said. So the travel there may not be, super ideal, but that's the only draw I can see there is that. So I'm not really sure the Giants are in a better position than Cleveland. They have to be in that division with the Dodgers. They don't really have the greatest roster. They definitely spend more money. They do have I would say the best ballpark in baseball outside of Pittsburgh, which is ironic for a lot of things for Pittsburgh. So yeah, I think you're right. I don't think he'd be leaving Cleveland if that was, unless the proximity to home was the big draw there. But I do think it's a reason for Cleveland to hammer out this extension over the offseason before I think this is the first thing you do at winter meetings. I think you just sit down, I don't know, 4 years? Sounds about right. I would say 4 years for Stephen Vogt. You put 4 on top of the third year.
Just for those who are curious, to get to Vizuela, where he grew up, is a 3.5-hour car ride. There's no planes. It's such a smaller area. So from San Francisco, it's still 3.5 hours. Yeah, it's still 3.5 hours to get there.
Well, I know, but like I'm just saying in general proximity. I'm not saying exact.
I don't even know if he's got family there. I was just throwing out the idea, just as a fun thing. I don't know. It seems like 3 to 4 years is probably the hot spot for another contract, right? Like 3 for this one. Maybe he gets 4 now, being a little more established. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why you don't do that. And I think you get that done before you even. What's the line from Moneyball that was so fake? It was Billy Beane talking to Art Howe about, I got to deal with the contract at first base, because right now if a ball goes to first base, no one's going to field it, and then we'll talk about your contract. It was no manager likes working under the gun of a 1-year deal. It says that you have no faith in them. I'm sure the Guardians have plenty of faith in Stephen Vogt. But I think they should do the opposite approach before they head into the offseason officially. Go ahead and get that contract extension because the Padres need a new manager, but things are weird there. The Twins need a new manager. The Giants, the Braves. Who else am I missing? The Orioles are looking for a new managerial. Am I missing somebody else? There's a sixth, right?
I missed some of it there. I'm sorry. I was looking at I was still trying to figure out what a Randy Wynn would be like, and I could not come up with one.
Yeah, and that's the other thing to be clear too is if there was some hope of the Giants landing Stephen Vogt this offseason, it would have to be a trade. By the way, the reason and part of the reason bringing this up too is Vogt was the backup for Buster Posey for a year, so they do have a relationship. I don't know. Buster Posey's kind of an interesting guy in terms of their president of baseball operations. He's kind of, it's not the usual president of baseball operations. He's not an Ivy leaguer. He doesn't have like an analytics background, all this other stuff. So it makes things a little bit unpredictable. So I don't know what Buster Posey's feelings are about Stephen Vogt, but obviously the Guardians like him, and hopefully in the offseason they talk about ways to improve. I don't know if you can necessarily improve things in the regular season. That's because I think he's proved everything he can in the regular season. He's 2 for 2 in division titles, and he kept the team together when things were falling apart this year. Certainly things can improve in terms of lineups, but you have to have the players for that. And then the playoff situation is what it is. And the only way you can get better at that is by learning. And he's got 13 games under his belt. Hopefully he'll have more next year to go. All right. You got something to say before we tease tomorrow's show?
Nope. Let's tease away.
All right. So tomorrow's show, we talked about what is ahead for Stephen Vogt. Let's turn to another Stephen tomorrow. We'll talk about what lies ahead for the Guardians and Stephen Kwan this offseason. What does Stephen Kwan need to do better in 2026, or what will the relationship be like heading into 2026? We'll get into all of that on tomorrow's show.
Thank you for joining. Remember to rate and review, download daily. It helps. Do your part. It's all free things you can do. Thank you all. And go Jeff, Guardians, go.
It was the mamas and the papas.
It's on a California, that one, right? That one's the one where we go. That's
California
Dream.